Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here inside TCO Performance Center along with Will Ragatz of Sports Illustrated and Andrew Krammer of the Star Tribune once again. And fellas, we've talked a lot about stuff with this team over the entire year and with the quarterback situation and everything else. We have a lot to talk about, but I wanted to play a little game with you guys. So I don't know if our listeners realize this, but my reputation on the beat is one of a perpetual line stepper, meaning that, when I shouldn't say something, sometimes it gets said. So what I want to do for this show is I want to preview Bengals and Vikings by stepping close to the line or maybe crossing the line. So I want you guys to make statements about this game and the team and our topics at hand and ask the question, am I going too far? Am I stepping over the line? So let me start out just to demonstrate. Am I stepping over the line by saying I think Jake Browning should throw like 4 interceptions in this game against Brian Flores' defense? I don't buy his magical ascension to being the Cincinnati Kurt Warner. I think they've thrown a bunch of screens and play actions against bad defenses, and I just don't believe it at all. Am I going over the line to make that statement?
You're certainly getting close to the line by throwing the 4 number out. I don't think Jake Browning is suddenly some incredible quarterback. I mean, we've seen Jake Browning dating back to 2020, 2021 as a Vikings kind of practice squad guy. He's been in the league for a while, and he's you can tell he sort of knows what he's doing as far as kind of playing the Nick Mullins role and executing it maybe with a higher ceiling than Nick Mullins has with some arm talent. But you're right that it's a lot of screens. It's a lot of kind of schemed up stuff. It's going to be tough for him going against Brian Flores' defense. I don't know if he's going to throw 3 or 4 interceptions, but I don't think he's going to have a particularly good day, even though he did go it was like 32 for 37 against whoever it was a couple weeks ago. Jacksonville, 350 yards. That's right. I was going to say Baltimore, but that was the game where Burrow got hurt. But you're getting close to the line there and maybe crossing it a little bit. But I don't know. I believe in Brian Flores' defense and have for a couple months now.
You like puns. I can't believe you didn't say close to the skyline. I can't believe you didn't lean into that. I think we're finding out in the NFL with all these backup quarterbacks getting in there who the good coaches are, right? We're finding out who the good coordinators are when it's all these Jake Brownings and Aiden O'Connells. I think we're seeing Zach Taylor's just a good coach, that he's going to adjust an offense that really allowed Joe Burrow previously to just play hero ball into a play action offense, a lot of screens, a lot of running back stuff, as you mentioned. So it doesn't matter if Jake Browning's not good, because this offense could still be schemed in such where maybe he gets Brian Flores on a play or two. Maybe Jamar Chase breaks a tackle. We've seen a Caleb Evans and Byron Murphy miss a lot of tackles on the perimeter. Those guys lead the Vikings secondary in missed tackles. So that's going to be big for this game, because those guys, whether it's T. Higgins or Chase or the running backs, can make a lot of plays on you. So I don't think you're overstepping the line, but I think it's not necessarily going to matter, because he's not going to, like Brock Purdy, he might not necessarily have to be, the guy who elevates everything. It's going to be a decent system with a decent coach that gives them a chance.
Okay. Do you guys want to try stepping over the line? Because I think, of course I did by saying 4 interceptions, but I think Browning is going to have a much tougher time just running a bunch of screens, because this team does do a good job against those, as we saw against both Chicago and against Las Vegas. You want to go over the line?
The related one that I was thinking of when you talk about that, it's an easy segue, is just with Brian Flores and what he's done with his defense this year. And there's a bunch of different ways that you could go with this. I mean, you look at just the DVOA since week 6. I think they're second in the league. EPA, they're now top 5. They're top 5 in points. They're like 8th in yards allowed. Like, you could talk about comparing it to other defenses this year. I'm gonna take a different approach and say I think Brian Flores is the best defensive play caller and defensive mind in the history of the Minnesota Vikings. And that's with acknowledgement to Mike Zimmer and to
that's over the skyline.
Bud Grant.
He gets the bit. And that's understanding the bit.
But I'm going for it. I think Brian Flores, just the job that he's done this season just look at the pieces on defense. This is not a defense like 2017 or 2019 where it was stacked with all pro talent. I mean, you got Danielle Hunter, who's still probably been the best player in the defense, and Harrison Smith still playing fairly well. He's not in his peak form anymore, but he's doing this with Ivan Pace Jr., who is an undrafted rookie who, to be fair, probably should have been drafted by somebody. He's doing this with Josh Metellus, who he's turned into a Pro Bowler after the guy's been a special teams player his whole career, basically. He's doing this with Cam Bynum, who looks like one of the best safeties in the league. Like, just the pieces. DJ Wanham, who we've talked about a lot as he gets like all these cleanup sacks, and I'm not sure he's a starting edge. He looks like a really kind of productive starting caliber edge this season. So I don't know. Am I stepping over the line with that one?
I think I see where you're coming from. I guess
Yeah.
I'll say that. I think Mike Zimmer did a lot of great things, and I think there's been a lot of good, great defensive coaches in this franchise's history. And we're seeing such a turnaround from Ed Donatel that it's easy to see that and think that this is one of the greatest turnarounds we've seen in the NFL, certainly recently. So that's a decent point about Flores in terms of his what he's been able to do in just such a short time, because he might be gone. I thought it was over the line to say this guy was going to be a head coaching candidate after 1 year, but he's earned it. If I had to try and say something like that, that's maybe blasphemous, I would say this Vikings offense has the potential with Nick Mullins to put up 30 points in Cincinnati. Why not? Why not? They've got everything but the quarterback figured out right now. But they might be playing a backup right tackle. They might be playing a backup running back. So it might hold them back a little bit. But I think that Nick Mullins is going to give them a timing and an anticipation and a little bit of a calmness in the operation that if they can protect him, this offense could get back on track in such a way that people go, hey, that's what we saw before.
Okay, let me touch on both line crossings. As far as Brian Flores goes, I do think we have to look at Mike Zimmer 2015 as a very similar type of turnaround, because he takes over the team. They were 32nd in 2013. 2 years later, they are an elite defense that's going down to Green Bay, shutting down Aaron Rodgers, getting into the playoffs. And I know it was very cold, but still holding Seattle's offense down in a playoff game. And then to say the 2017 defense was good would be ridiculous. They were amazing.
Yeah.
They were number one in everything: points, yards, passing, rushing, third downs, like every category. And we look at these guys now and go, well, Metellus was a 6th rounder, but then we were saying, hey, Danielle Hunter's this 3rd rounder who, like, I know that there were some other 1st round picks like Barr, but even Eric Kendricks, it wasn't clear he was going to be a star. So it's following a similar path, but it has made me believe very strongly in that person, that role, as being a little more valuable than maybe I thought. I kind of thought, well, it's roster, but creativity, development, and so forth. The 30 points is a little harder for me to get to. Now, Jefferson being back and playing with a quarterback that might suit him a little more, like not throwing it so high that
the Bengals defense is also not good.
That is another part for sure. The Bengals defense is not good at all. Yeah. It's just, when I was watching back Nick Mullins, I was thinking, well, that was almost picked. Ooh, that was almost picked. Oh, that was almost picked. I mean, even the throw that he makes to Jordan Addison to win the game, when you look at it on tape, that corner is breaking on that football, and he comes this close to picking that thing off, running it all the way back, and we're having a different conversation.
Oh, but he didn't.
But he didn't. It feels similar to what we said with Dobbs, where we're like, you know what? If he runs backward the other way around every game, someone's going to kill him. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. 30 points, I would say, is a lot to ask, but I do agree with you that the Cincinnati defense is not what we expected them to be coming into the season.
It would be quite the ironic turn if the Vikings went from scoring 3 points in one game to then having like 34 the next week. And if there is a defense to do it against with this version of the Kirk Cousins-less Vikings, it's the Bengals, who have allowed 11 more explosive plays than any other team in the league this year. They've allowed 96. The Vikings are in first with like 54. So it's a lot of 20-yard passes and 10-yard runs. And yeah, it's going to be a little difficult for the Vikings if they don't have Brian O'Neill or Alexander Mattison, which I think we're kind of assuming is going to be the case. But when you've got Justin Jefferson, you've got Hockenson, you've got Addison, I think if they can find ways to get Ty Chandler in space, I still like what he does there. Clearly, they haven't really trusted him with the way that they went back to Madison after we had the whole Chandler-Madison debate. But hey, get CJ Ham some more carries. He averaged 7 yards per carry last week, 1 carry for 7 yards. So
that's crossing the line.
Get CJ Ham more carries. No, I don't actually believe that. But I like what they've done with CJ Ham in all seriousness, like using him in pass protection on third down. He does a really good job with that. I'm with you.
I don't actually believe it. I was just trying to
No, I know that's
gin it up,
that's
but
the game. That's the game.
But I do think this is going to be something where they probably don't reach that because O'Connell's going to be conservative, right? And there's been moments where we probably would even criticize him for being too conservative. But when this defense is playing as well as it's playing, I think that's why he's going to do that. And when you're on your fourth quarterback, he's probably not going to call as many pass plays. You would hope he probably could have called more running plays in Las Vegas, even. But at the same time, I think this is going to be a much more calm operation with Mullins. It should be anyway, because Dobbs, he's just been playing at such a level that we're going to see him probably as the third quarterback, not even the backup on Saturday.
Folks, we are going all in on Prize Picks this football season. Every week we are playing and testing out our skills here on Purple Insider to see if we can predict what numbers players will put up every Sunday. If you haven't heard of it, trust me, you're going to want to check it out. Prize Picks is the easiest and best way to play daily fantasy. Instead of battling against thousands of other players and people who spend their entire lives doing fantasy, all you do is pick more or less on between 2 and 6 player stat projections. So say a quarterback's number is 250.5 yards, go more or less and bang, you are playing. And you can pick from hundreds of players and numbers this football season. The cool thing is that it's quick and easy and does not cost an arm and a leg. You can turn $10 into $250 just like that. Again, the perfect way to fit it into a busy day. Click, and you're playing. This isn't just something that I like. You're going to hear us doing every single week, Prize Picks on the show on Purple Insider. So go to prizepicks.com/purple and use the code PURPLE for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/purple with the code PURPLE. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Okay, so of course I cross the line all the time. Easily, it's part of who I am. But there was someone online, a legendary quarterback, who may have crossed the line with his opinion on what happened against the Raiders, which was Kurt Warner made a whole video and they put it on the NFL's main YouTube account saying the Vikings should not have benched Josh Dobbs. And his argument was, A, look at the number of drops that happened. KJ Osborne got a football right between the two numbers and dropped it, among others. But also, there were some plays that he looked at where he said, where's the ball supposed to go here? What is Josh Dobbs supposed to do here? And it seemed like Kevin O'Connell was just hovering his hand over that button, waiting. Like, I want my quarterback who can operate my offense. And as soon as it didn't go well, he smashed the button. In the moment, of course, I did not disagree with him at all. But did Kurt Warner cross the line saying that Dobbs should not have been benched?
It's hard for me to say that Hall of Fame quarterback and two-time MVP
roast him, Will.
Cross the line. No, and I'm sympathetic to, or not sympathetic, but I'm understanding of where he was coming from when you look at some of the tape and you look at the fact that PFF credited Dobbs pass catchers with 6 drops. Like, he's 10 for 23, but that's, if you catch all 6 of those, you're 16 for 23. You got more yards. The numbers don't look nearly as bad. I don't know. It's one of those things where I know where he's coming from. I see it. I don't think Dobbs was nearly as bad as just the numbers looked and maybe the broadcast of the game looked at times. But at the same time, I don't think there's much debate at all that going to Mullins was something they had to do in that situation with 9 minutes left in the game, and arguably probably should have done earlier to give yourself just a spark and just to change things up. It's like there was just certain factors of the way that Dobbs plays the game, plays quarterback, just weren't really working to some degree. And there were some drops to me where it's like, yes, it's a drop, but also the ball just isn't right where it should be. And you can't kind of forget about the fact that he got Justin Jefferson literally sent to the hospital with a ball that was too high and just some throws that are slightly behind people. And the fact that Dobbs' run game as a scrambler has kind of been shut down. If you want a guy to just be your pocket passer and operate the offense, it's not that Nick Mullins is like way better than Josh Dobbs or just significantly more advanced at playing quarterback, but he knows the offense better. He's been in the system longer. he's going to be a little bit more trustworthy with the rhythm and timing and making the right decision quickly. So I agree with the coaching staff's decision to bench Dobbs in the moment and to start Mullins this week. But I also understand where Warner's coming from by saying, all right, everybody, let's relax. Like Dobbs, that wasn't Josh Freeman level bad or anything.
Yeah, I think Kurt Warner was absolutely right when you're talking about all the drops. I mean, we can see it, whether it's KJ Osborne dropping one that hit him right in the numbers. But then there's some that, as you mentioned, Will, that I think are a quarterback in Josh Dobbs who's just not really known to be hyper accurate and clearly doesn't have a ton of timing down with these receivers, and also throws a very fast and heavy kind of pass compared to some of the other quarterbacks like Kirk or Mullins, for instance. So when you see Addison break on a dig route and that ball comes out early because he doesn't have the timing down, and then it kind of comes up on him really quickly and he tips it into an interception like he did in the Bears game. I mean, those are the kind of things that stick with this coaching staff where they're thinking Nick Mullins probably waits in the beat of in the rhythm of the play and gets that ball out. And it might not get there as quickly, and maybe it gets batted down because a defensive back can close on him, but it's not going to end in that catastrophic play with a guy who just doesn't have the timing. And when we use these cliches like timing and practice time and the history built up in the chemistry, that's what it means in terms of the small details of just ending in a catastrophic play. So I don't think that, certainly I'm not going to say Kurt Warner's wrong, but I also don't think Kevin O'Connell's wrong to say we need a change. You scored 3 points. Like, you were about to head to the first 0-0 game in regulation in forever. So I can't argue with the coach saying, you know what, we got to go to a change, try something else, because you've got 4 games to save your season right now. And part of it is too that this Vikings offense, these drops, they are who they are. They lead the league in drops now. They've done this all season. They went through a period in the middle of the year where they kind of cleaned it up, but beginning of the year has been awful. Recently, it's been awful. Some of this too is just kind of who this crew kind of is right now.
I was rooting for the first 0-0 tie since 1943.
43, is that it?
Yes. Yeah. It was
Wow.
World War II.
Why don't you just go back to the Hall of Fame, Kurt Warner? How about that? just go look at your Super Bowl ring or something. No, I appreciated the breakdown from Kurt Warner, because I do think that it felt so horrific in the moment that when you see someone say like Dobbs shouldn't have been benched, you're like, excuse me. But I thought that his logic was sound, and I think they can both be right. That it was right to make the change to try to just get something going. I'm surprised that doesn't happen more in the league, where a quarterback's having a really tough day. It used to back in the day, but I think now everybody's more sensitive to that and what it would mean. It's like if you bench your quarterback, it's such a huge story that I might as well just leave him in there. But when it's Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs, I think that they are different but have the same problem. They're different as in Josh Dobbs can't control how fast he throws the football or where.
Yeah.
And Mullins can, but can't throw it hard enough. And so it's kind of like having 2 cars, and one of them, the gas pedal sticks down and you might run a red light as you're trying to get it to pop off or something. But the other one can't get above 47 miles an hour. And you're like, well, guess who's not winning the race? Or wanting to stick with this car. They are backups for a reason, and either one is going to have their problems. I do think that Nick Mullins is at least making O'Connell feel more like he can call what he needs to call. And there was one play that I thought where a rusher came through it and Mullins knew where his outlet was. And I think that Dobbs didn't in a lot of ways, where the pressure would come and there was no other option for him but either run or get sacked. Opposing teams figured out the running part, and then you just have really nothing there. Would it be stepping over the line to say that Ty Chandler will finish this game with 120 plus all-purpose yards with Alexander Madison down? Is that over the line?
Yes, I think so. I don't know. I mean, it's possible with the kind of athlete that Ty Chandler is, but it's been interesting, and it's hard to really diagnose what the exact reasons are, but the coaching staff, just as I kind of alluded to earlier, clearly doesn't seem to really put a ton of trust in Ty Chandler. To the obvious one we always point to is the pass protection, but I think there's also things with vision and stuff we've talked about
alignment
with Madison in the past when it was Dalvin Cook as the starter, alignment and hitting the right hole and being trusted to kind of help your blockers out and make them right. So I mean, I think there's really no other option. They're not going to like turn to Kene Wongwu or something. It's going to be Ty Chandler. But yeah, I think he'll need to break like a big 50, 60-yard play to get to that number, which could happen. I see a little more of like a 15 carries for 54 yards and maybe a couple catches. But
Will, you're forgetting about, as Mark Sanchez likes to call him, the pride of Lake Superior, CJ Ham,
Exactly.
Duluth, Denfeld's own. He's probably going to end up getting like a decent amount of the third down work, maybe a couple carries. He had a run, I suppose, in Las Vegas. It's kind of a unexciting option, but one that the coaching staff just loves, and we know we're going to see him. And that's why I think Ty Chandler is probably not going to get that kind of true workhorse like you're talking about, that much kind of work. So I would have to agree with you.
So I went all purpose for a reason,
Hmm.
because I also think there's going to be a lot of checkdowns in this game. And I mean, it doesn't really take that much when we include the receiving part to get him to 70 yards rushing and 50 yards receiving.
What do you have in Denver?
he,
Was
he
it like
did
110?
it. It was like
or-
120-ish
Okay.
against Denver, yeah.
I mean,
So-
if like they will not play Kene Wongwu at running back, I mean, he's going to have to get in there at some point, but we've basically never seen that. I have struggled to decide whether I think that's a failure by the coaching staff or not. Like, I understand when you can't trust players, but also when they run a 4.3 at 6'1" and 210 pounds, is there a way? Is there anything we can do here? Like, I watch Miami and I think all these guys can't be flawless within the offense, right? Are they just fast and ball goes to them? So I'd like to see a little more creativity with Kene Wongwu. It just doesn't seem like that's in the cards. And yeah, would I be shocked if CJ Ham ended up with 8 carries and 5 catches and 52 snaps or something? Of course I wouldn't, because trust just seems to be the thing that supersedes everything else with Kevin O'Connell. And does somebody want to cross the line with a Kevin O'Connell take? I've gotten emailers who have crossed the line. Anybody want to cross the line? If you won't, I will.
No, go please, go ahead.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I do.
I'm curious to see which direction you're
Yeah.
gonna go with that.
Okay, well, I did get an email saying he should be fired and they should put Brian Flores in. Now that, I think we all agree. The reason to play the game is to have it close to the line, not like blowing by the line. Close to the line, I think, would be saying that your belief in Kevin O'Connell being able to shapeshift, use people to their strengths, has reduced after watching him without the starting quarterback, because they didn't do that. And there have been players who are like Ty Chandler or like Kene Wongwu, got to be useful somehow, and have not been found a way to be useful. Josh Dobbs clearly can't be Kirk Cousins, and yet seemed to be asked to be Kirk Cousins in a lot of instances. And now that's in part one of the reasons you're having to make the change. Is it across the line to say when they go and make that decision for quarterback, it better be his favorite guy? It better be someone who fits flawlessly with what he wants to do, because he's not changing that as it comes to the passing offense.
Ooh, that is a good one where you're stepping right up to the line there. That you're navigating it, straddling it a little bit. I think my faith in Kevin O'Connell, my belief in Kevin O'Connell as a play caller, an offensive designer, kind of reached its peak after that Falcons game, when I was like, he did what with a guy who had been here for 3 days, and give Josh Dobbs a ton of credit for some of the magic that he was able to pull out of his hat in that game. But then first half against the Saints, I'm like, this team's going to win the Super Bowl. But it's weird. It's a weird dynamic where the longer that Josh Dobbs was in the system, and the more he theoretically learned the offense, like the worse it got. Like, it's a strange thing where I get the other part of it too, is defenses then had plans for him and they had tape on him and they adjusted. But it seems like the Vikings, the last couple of games, Bears and Raiders specifically, weren't really able to adjust back and find ways to get Dobbs out of the pocket and get him some of those rushing attempts. And I know that teams can kind of use their edge players and try to keep him contained, but it was odd to me that O'Connell wasn't able to sort of find some way to kind of keep the Dobbs thing going. And I don't know how much of that is on O'Connell or is on Dobbs or is on what defenses were doing, but I agree that like your faith in him slips a tiny bit. And I don't want to be too critical kind of about anything in the post Kirk Cousins world, because that's such a season killer realistically for any team. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of a question in my head now where does O'Connell need the Cousins type to be his next quarterback, or can he, with a whole offseason, with more preparation, really cook up a game plan for a Dobbs type of a better version of that kind of quarterback prototype?
It's going to make me sound like the homer now. I can't believe it. No, I think you're absolutely stepping over the line. What he did in Atlanta, what Kevin O'Connell did, what Josh Dobbs did, like that was enough to say that this whole season was a success post Kirk Cousins injury. Because once the way Kirk was playing, he could have been getting all pro votes by the end of the year if he had continued that, especially with the way the defense is rounding into form. Their biggest question mark right now with this team, if Kirk Cousins were healthy, would be the fact that they can't hold on to the football, the fumbles, the drops, all that stuff. Like just their skill talent has been betraying the rest of their offense, even though they've been healthy largely outside of the Jefferson injury. So I think Kevin O'Connell as a pass game coordinator is one of the best in the NFL. I think when you say Kirk Cousins type, to me, that just means an accurate in rhythm quarterback. That doesn't need to be the most accurate. It doesn't need to be Kirk. But it's certainly a lot better when it is. And I think Dobbs, the reason we've seen him bounce around so many teams and not get many opportunities is because he must be this inconsistent behind the scenes. He must be this kind of guy just generally as a player. There's no questioning, obviously, the intellect that's been well talked about. But in terms of just getting out there and being a consistent performer, it's not there. And so I don't put too much of that on O'Connell. Clearly, in the middle of the season, he cannot transform the offense into a read option. He can't make Alexander Mattison comfortable with getting the ball taken out of his hands by a quarterback because they've never practiced that until recently. I don't put that so much on him. What I would put on him this year is they don't have much of a run game. They haven't been able to coordinate a run game. That's not really his purview, obviously. So with Curtis Modkins and what they have on staff and Chris Cooper and the offensive line coach trying to do that, they need to find a better way to do it. And they invested the resources in the front office to get a better running game. And that's been one of the biggest failures as well with this Vikings team. When you just look at it objectively and take injuries out of it, the run game has been abysmal. So that to me is the biggest question mark with O'Connell as an offensive guy. You need to be more than a pass game guy. Look what Mike McDaniel's doing in Miami. No one saw that coming. No one saw their game, their offense turning from one of the most electric passing games you've ever seen to being one of the best running games you've ever seen with a 31-year-old Raheem Mostert. So you're right, Matt. When you talk about Miami, that's the kind of offense where you see them just plug in playmakers and find a way in the run game, no less. And that's what I want to see out of O'Connell to say he's one of the best head coaches. But right now, I think him as a pass game coordinator, a game planner, a game caller, I think that's largely been successful. It's just been undercut by a lot of different things.
And that's Kyle Shanahan too.
Yeah.
Even before they had Christian McCaffrey, it's the run game it was Elijah Mitchell or whoever. They are able to marry things so well and be so balanced and get explosives on the ground and through the air. And the Vikings just haven't really been able to do that. I think is their longest run of the season the Ty Chandler fake punt?
I think so.
I think it is.
Yeah, except Madison had a 21-yarder against the Bears. That was his longest. And
Madison looked good in the first half against the Raiders before he got hurt. But, the run game just hasn't been there all year.
And not having support from the run game for the pass game also, I think, makes a difference. There was kind of a sense that you can still run play action without really effective running. But there's a part that's missed there, which is the opportunities that you're in. It's not that you can't run play action. It's how often you can run play action. It's pretty hard to run play action on 2nd and 12 because no one believes you. And the Vikings have been in a lot of 2nd and 12s. It did make me think the way that this has played out a little bit that there should have been more maybe paring it back for Dobbs, not necessarily revamping an entire offense, but everyone has said, including Wes Phillips has talked about, we have to give him the whole offense because that's how we get receivers open. You're like, I get that. But when you look at Jake Browning over the last couple of weeks, the screens, the play actions, the things that you can do, and Zach Taylor and Kevin O'Connell come from the same place. They also had a similar style quarterback. I think we all think Burrow's better, but he's a pocket quarterback who throws with accuracy and anticipation and timing and rhythm. So it's sort of similar along the same lines. But to your point, Andrew, find his work at vikingsfan.web, by the way, now.
Classic homer.
But to your point, if you use Pro Football Reference and you search from the moment Kevin O'Connell got here to the moment Kirk Cousins got hurt, they were 7th in scoring in the NFL. And when Cousins got hurt this year, they were top 5 in expected points added through passing. And if you can get those type of numbers, you're going to be pretty successful. And even if you take a step forward as far as
no
the
run game,
with no run game, right? With no run game, and for 2 years, right? And I mean, realistically, they probably just need a better running back. I think the scheme is a little muddled, but a lot of times it was likely just on the running back, or at least a lot of the numbers would say that as far as the blocking grades, the rushing yards over expected stuff. So I don't look at Kevin O'Connell at all and say like, oh man, they should just, strip the play calling abilities or hire Flores or anything quite like that. But I don't think that completely removes any criticism to say, as you mentioned, Will, like it kept getting worse as opposed the more that the offense that he learned because he doesn't fit. And I also kept thinking Michael Penix makes so much more sense to me now after seeing this. Like that is the guy who throws with accuracy, who could sit in the pocket, let things develop, anticipate accuracy, arm strength, all those things that if we're talking about the future of the quarterback position, that they need to get the perfect fit for him. Like we go back to that Will Levis thing. Maybe it's like, is it crossing the line to say they should have drafted Will Levis? You can give me your opinion, but I say no, because like that's not his type of quarterback. And I think what we know from this is he really needs his type to run this offense.
Yeah. I mean, I have a general one that like, I think when we look back at this season, there's going to be, it's been a wild season. There was the beginning of the year where they couldn't stop turning the ball over and you're like, all right, this team should be better than this. Like they keep losing these games. And then they started to get rolling kind of without Justin Jefferson. And I think it was like when Kirk Cousins hit Jordan Addison for a touchdown in Green Bay to go up 24-3, you're like, all right, this team might actually be pretty dang good. And then Kirk gets hurt. The Dobbs Linsanity run happens, which will be fun to remember in like 10 years. But my potentially stepping up to the line take is that if this team with this defense had Kirk Cousins still healthy, they'd be the third best team in the NFC behind only San Francisco and Dallas, and not insanely far behind those two teams. Like I think they would be a legitimate tier 2 Super Bowl contender with just everything that we saw when Kirk was firing on all cylinders and with what the defense has done for the last month, 2 months. So it's to me, it's always going to kind of be like a what if season in that regard.
I would have really liked to have seen Brian Flores' defense against a healthy San Francisco. Like with Debo, with Trent, like that, I really think it would have looked different, and a not concussed Brock Purdy at the end. I think that did tilt things in the Vikings' favor, because when you talk about them as a Super Bowl contender, that's what we envision in terms of what the height of the conference and the matchup would look like. And I think they could have stood toe-to-toe with what we're looking at in terms of how they played Christian McCaffrey in that game, albeit without those two guys I mentioned. I don't think that's too overstepping it, just because of the way Kirk was really playing in this offense.
And they got the Eagles in week 2 when they didn't really know what they were doing, I think, as a defense yet. And they were still figuring out some of how they wanted to play on the defensive line and how they wanted to, and they gave up like 300 rushing yards. I think like they could be better than the Eagles right now with healthy Kirk and with the way that the defense has been playing.
I don't know about that one,
That's
but
crossing the line.
I would say though that look at this conference. The NFC sucks. So I think that really it's just the top guy. It's the 3 teams. It's Dallas, Philly, and San Francisco. To me, Detroit looks very vulnerable right now. You've seen Goff have some very bad moments against Chicago, no less. So I just think that the Vikings, if they could have stayed healthy, why not? Because of especially how mediocre the rest of this conference looks.
So a few things on that. I mean, number one, there are still 4 games to go for Brian Flores' defense, and they are against good offenses. It has been a while since they've faced a good offense. That this matters to the calculation, because we are declaring them a top 5 defense right now. Will they finish as a top 5 defense after they faced Detroit twice, who's a top 10 offense, and even Green Bay, save for the other night?
The last time we saw him against Jordan Love.
Yeah, no, that's true. But Jordan Love has improved. I know against the Giants wasn't perfect, but he's improved since then. Plus, they got to look at it. So now they're going to see it again. I just don't want to say, oh, well, this defense would have been up there with what San Francisco and Dallas can do defensively, because I think those teams have more talent. and they've been squeezing the most out of it. And Aiden O'Connell is not an NFL quarterback. Like that to me says St. Louis Battlehawks all over it. Like it just that right. And so does Tyson Bagent, who they took advantage of and everything else. And honestly, Bryce Young is playing like that right now as well.
Come on.
I mean that is no. I'm not saying he's going to be that. I'm saying he's playing like that. He's playing like a replacement level guy you brought in from the XFL quarterback. And I think that because Kirk got hurt when he did, we were like, oh man, he would have just kept playing like that through the rest of the season. We know Kirk Cousins. We saw Carolina. We saw Chicago. Like there would have been other games where we were like, huh?
Right, he went down in Kirktober. So
maybe in Atlanta.
Died a hero.
Maybe in Atlanta or
like
against,
Batman.
Against New Orleans. Like maybe those actually play out differently with Kirk Cousins. So I don't want to say that I would have put them in the same category as the three best teams in the NFC. Detroit, though, like, could they have been neck and neck with Detroit? Yeah, I think so. I just think we can't forget like how many times we saw Kirk Cousins play super well and we're like, whoa, this will stay forever. And then 3 weeks later, it doesn't happen.
The Carolina game, he had a bad game, a really bad game in Carolina, I thought.
Right. It's the Kirk coaster for a reason. Yeah. But would they have gone into the playoffs, though? More likely than not, as a dangerous team that somebody could be upset in the first round. Of course that could have happened. Let's close out with this because we got to go up to the locker room and so forth. But let's close with this. Let's say that I told you that 3 of the final 4 games went in one direction, either a win or a loss. Which would you think I was talking about? If I said 3 out of 4 went this way, either a win or a loss, which would I be saying? Would I be saying they won 3 out of 4 or lost 3 out of 4?
I think loss would be more likely. Just when you have Nick Mullins.
Vikings hater.web, Will Ragatz.
Well, I've been kind of going both ways here where I've said some outlandishly homery things. So I'll balance it out by saying I think losing 3 out of 4 feels more likely to me than winning 3 out of 4. And I know I just got done ranting about how good Brian Flores' defense has been, but it's Nick Mullins. It's you forget about all those graphics talking about his first 17 starts compared to Andrew Luck or whatever, which I've seen on circulating on social media. The guy is a backup caliber quarterback with backup caliber arm talent. To me, that suggests it could be some 3 and outs and some turnovers, and the schedule in this last 4 is good enough that they certainly could win 3 of the last 4 if the defense keeps playing like this, but I think the more likely outcome would be they lose 3 of the last 4. And I am actually going to pick them, I think, to lose this game in Cincinnati.
You've been good at picking them this year.
I was good early. I was been a little cold recently.
Regression to the will.
I think they're probably going to – this team's got 2-2 written all over it for
the
the end of it, right? But if I had to pick it to lean one way or the other, I guess I would go 3 losses just because I don't see, as you mentioned with Nick Mullins, I think – he's going to provide them a little bit of a boost here, but it's how sustained is that going to be? How much is that going to last week to week? I really don't know. And I don't have a ton of confidence in. And if this offense continues to be banged up the way that it is, I don't know if they can find many answers other than Jefferson and their passing game. So I would say 3 losses, and I would say those 3 losses would probably be, I think they're going to win Saturday and then drop the final 3 if that would be it. Yeah.
And miss the playoffs?
Well, see, I think they're going to go 2-2 though. I think they'll pick up a win against Detroit. I think they'll split against Detroit and lose to Green Bay for some reason. I think the way that Green Bay is playing right now they're going to catch them a little bit differently, and then I think they'll split against Detroit.
Any combination of 2 wins gets them into the playoffs. So we know exactly what they need, and it's also, in my mind as well, the most likely scenario, but that doesn't cross the line. It only crosses the line if we're talking about 3 wins or 3 losses.
4 wins.
It's 4 wins. I'm surprised Andrew didn't say that. Like they're just going to win
4-0,
out.
Yeah.
Kevin O'Connell, coach of the year, championship. The last, just the last thing I'll say is a stat that will hit you in the face a little bit. The last quarterback who was a backup to go to the Super Bowl that played more than 5 games. So, Nick Foles came in, played like 3-4 games after Carson Wentz got hurt, was Tom Brady in 2001. And the only quarterbacks who have gone from the wild card to win the Super Bowl are Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, Tom Brady, and Aaron Rodgers. So, enjoy the ride, I guess, for whatever is coming up next. I mean, we
Are
never
you
know.
telling all
but
the people out there that they shouldn't be thinking Nick Mullins is going to win the Super
I-
Bowl?
Nick Mullins, Tom Brady.
I'm saying that Nick Mullins is Tom Brady, which does not cross the line at all. That's exactly what I am intimating. Anyway, well, we got to run, but thanks so much, everybody, for watching. I think that the Vikings will win in Cincinnati. I agree. I think they're going to find a way, but then after that, it'll still be maybe potentially treacherous. But thanks, everybody, for watching, and we will do this again next week. Football.
Football.